Okay. All right. So, hello, everybody. And I'm so happy, delighted to be joined by my very good friend, Tracey Cox, who is a best-selling author, a TV personality, a much revered writer, and an all-round wonderful person. So, a self-made woman and with many, many books, a product line, etc., to her name. So I thought she would be an ideal guest for this podcast because she is somebody who appears very, very confident, very successful in her career, and fearless when it comes to talking about the issues that she specializes in, which are often sort of taboo subjects for most people. So, sex and relationships. And we first met on a show called Hotter Sex when I was a producer director and she was the star of the show. And I was immediately struck by how she was not only sassy and sexy and beautiful, but also just hyper intelligent and a really fantastic communicator. And plus, what's more, very, very down to earth with a great sense of humor. So, welcome to the show, Ms. Tracey Cox.
I think we should just leave it there. I can't possibly get better than that, can I? Just leave it there.
And my,
Thanks,
my
Grace.
My first question is, how do you describe yourself? Because lots and lots of people have a great difficulty in selling themselves or describing who they are. How do you describe yourself?
Um, I think I was the person that they originally coined the dreadful term sexpert for, but now I say sex educator, which I think is a much better term. Sexpert sounds like I just lie around just practicing having sex all day long, doesn't it? It doesn't sound very professional, but sex educator does sound more professional. Actually, I say author and mainly author because that's my main job is writing books and column. So author, columnist, writer, and then the sexpert or the sex educator bit comes at the end because even though my job is about sex and relationships, at the end of it, at the main core of it is journalism and writing.
Yes, yeah. So if you were gonna like answer that thing about how do you sell yourself, how do you pitch yourself, that's how you would do it in those five different headings, basically.
Yeah, I'd say a journalist who specializes in sex and relationships, or an author who specializes in sex and relationships.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And then so tell me, can we just cast our minds back to where it all began? Bearing in mind that you are super successful and in the public eye, et cetera, et cetera. Did you always plan for this success? I mean, what were you like? Paint a picture of the mini Tracy, the little girl Tracy, or the teenage Tracy.
I think little girl Tracy was writing all sorts of stories, like creative writing stories, and winning awards, and also getting banned from things because I was writing these stories, quite erotic stories, having never experienced anything sexual myself. And my mum was like, "What's going on?" And I think I just read so many books. I just read like mad when I was young, and this sort of translated into I don't know. I don't think I quite knew what I was writing half the time. But I always had a plan. I always wanted to write. I knew that I wanted to be editing Cosmopolitan magazine, which was the big thing at the time, which I did by the time I was 24. So I realized that goal a bit too early, really. And I don't think anyone ever sets out to be a sex expert and to have sex toy product ranges, even though that's the best thing I ever did. But I certainly set out to be. I was always ambitious, always incredibly ambitious, always very driven. I don't know where it came from. My dad is a very successful businessman. My mum used to work. She's been a model and then worked in dress shops and stuff. So she wasn't terribly ambitious, but put her in another time and she might have been. So I think that fire in the belly's always been there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you were the editor of Cosmopolitan by the age of 24. I mean, that's got
Yes.
to be that. Is
Associate
that
editor.
so? You were a bit of a rocket star even in your early career, then.
Yes, I was associate editor rather than editor, but the editor above me was an editor above more than one publication, and she's still not. She's still there. She's amazing. She's still there. So I knew she wasn't going to budge. So that was as far as I was going to get. So yes, I did. I did succeed quite early, but I don't know. I think the main thing that I really wanted to do was write a book, and I wrote my first book in 1999, and that was the best experience in the world. The book arriving, like my very first book. And so that was amazing. So I think I always wanted to write a book. And then after that, then it went into TV, it went into all different types of things, areas that I hadn't really planned on going into. But because of the books, it sort of naturally went into those different areas. So it was all
Yeah.
very exciting. So there was always something new to challenge me along the way.
So, what do you think the qualities that you had enabled you to become associate editor by the age of 24? Because that's when most people are actually just starting their, just get, I was terribly, terribly unhip at the age of 24. Um, Probably still wearing dungarees, that kind of thing. So to be in charge of something like that by 24 would have been unfathomable to me. So, what qualities did you have to get you there so quickly?
I don't know, determined. I'm quite a determined person. I remember when I left university, I wrote hundreds and hundreds of letters, like and hand wrote them, right? Trying to get a job. I'm quite determined to get where I want to get, and I think I'm quite good with people. I like people, and I think people like me. I'm quite kind. I don't think I can honestly say I don't think I've ever steamrolled over anyone to get where I am. I wouldn't do it. So I think that helps. And I work bloody hard. I work so hard. And
Yeah.
you could vouch for that as my friend. I've worked
Yes.
really, really hard. And so anyone who ever says, I'm an overnight success, you look at them and when they never are. They're always people
Yeah.
who have worked their asses off ever since, year dot. So I
Yeah.
think it's hard work. I think I am talented, but I think a lot of it is prepared to put the prior planning preparation into it.
Oh,
Is that your
sorry. I've
dog?
just had I've just had the dogs come in. Right, just sit down, doggies. Right, okay, let's try and go. Yeah, so what I'm hearing is a lot of tenacity, though. I mean, presumably
Yes.
in that side, there's determination, but there's also tenacity there. To how did you? I mean, I guess I don't know whether you had knockbacks on the way to that early success, but can you tell us a little bit about how you how you remain tenacious in the face of any knockbacks? Have you had any
Mm.
knockbacks?
Oh my God, yes. I wrote hundreds of letters and I think I got out of 150 letters, I got one yes from that. And to the point where, I mean, when I left university, I'm looking back now, I was unemployed for about 4 months. And it was my brother-in-law I sat down with after writing more and more letters, more and more letters. And I think I was just thinking I would go back and do my master's if I couldn't get a job in journalism. It was the profession to be in at that time. And he ended up ringing up a small suburban group of newspapers and said, I don't suppose you've got any vacancies for a cadet. And they said, yeah, we do. And that's how I got on. But, I think I was nearly about to give up on the journalism degree and maybe go in and become a full-time psychologist, which I'm glad I didn't do because I love counseling via the media and I love doing sex therapy, but I've got many psychologists and sex therapist friends, and I don't think I have the disassociation skills. I think I'd be just looking after everyone forever. I just cannot. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not very good at.
you're very, very caring. That's the thing. Sorry, let me just let this one out. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
game doing a podcast with dogs in the room.
Yeah, I know. It's gonna be podcast Fasttrack to Fearless with Tracy and dogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and what about as a woman in your industry, presumably, I don't know, I'm assuming that there were many women in the industry, women journalists, et cetera. But did you have any obstacles in that way, being a woman, do you think?
No, I think if anything, it was the time to be a woman because remember, I mean, I grew up, I'm now about to be 60. So I grew up and went around that time. It was that you can have it all. It was Women's Lib. It was Cosmo was the, big, fierce, strong magazine. And so we were living what we were told, you can have it all, Helen Gurley Brown, all that sort of stuff. So I don't think I have encountered sexism in my industry. But then it's a very female dominated industry. Like I work in television, I've worked in, I've been a columnist, I've been an author, I've been all that sort of stuff. It's all female dominated. I mean, if I'd been a banker, if I'd been a lawyer, if I'd been a scientist, it would have been a different story. And also when you look back, the stuff that I would take in my stride, I think, oh my God, I can't believe people said that or did that. It was quite all this that everyday sexism stuff, you think, wow, you'd never be able to talk to me like that now. Not in a bad way, not ever putting me down, but in a flirtatious way. where you just
Yeah.
think, wow, that was sort of maybe did make me feel slightly uncomfortable, but I'm good at getting past those situations and making a joke of it and moving forward.
I
So,
mean, on that note, it's very interesting because we watched the original Bridget Jones the other day, and it is full
oh
of
no,
sexist comments and that you would never accept today. And she just, like you say, just sort of accepts it as part of the bants, you know.
yes.
So yeah. So what would you say? So it sounds like you had a meteoric rise at a very early age. Um, um, what, if any, have been the career obstacles for you?
What have they been? Well, I had to move countries from one side of the world to another because I'm English, but I grew up in Australia, and the glass ceiling in Australia at that time was very low. So I wrote my first book, and then the book got bought by the UK and the US markets, and I got offered to do a TV show. Was it the one you worked on? I think no. No, I think yours was the other one. And so moved across to the other side of the world all on my own. No, didn't know anyone over here or anything. So that was quite a big move. Not that I hated doing it; I quite enjoyed it. And I did it all myself. I never ever got a leg up. Like my dad was a successful businessman, but he came from a council estate in England. So it's not like we've had lots of money or, no one's handed me anything. I've done it all myself. So
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't an easy thing to do, but yeah, I didn't. It's funny that I look back and I don't really see any big obstacles in the way.
Obstacle. But do you think that's a matter of mindset?
It might well be, yeah. It might well be. But no, I didn't see anything in my way. I kept being told, and I'm very conscious of this with my stepdaughter. I keep saying to her, "No, don't go for that. You've got to be. It's a really hard career to get into." But I aim to be an author, and I was one of the few authors that actually made a living from writing books, and that's like 0.01% of all authors or something. So it's wrong for me to discourage her going into a business or a job that's got low odds of succeeding when
Yes,
I went into that. But also, I knew that I so passionately wanted to do it. I've always wanted to be a writer from when I was about 3, I reckon. And
yeah,
I I think you need that. I think if you're going to aim for one of those professions that's hard to succeed in, you've
yes,
got to want to do it more than anything in the world.
yes, and take all the knockback. But I mean, also, it sounds like, you talk about your stepdaughter saying, "Oh, don't do that because la la la." But it sounds like maybe you didn't have those barriers set for you by your parents. You did,
No, I didn't.
yeah,
They were
yeah,
like, "You can do whatever you want. You'll be whoever you want. You're amazing." Both my parents were incredibly supportive, and even now, I mean, when I went into ended up writing about sex and relationships and being called a sexpert and having my own sex toy ranges now, they've never been embarrassed about it. They'll never
yeah,
say. I mean, my mum once said, "God, darling, why don't you take up gardening or something?" But they just think it's hilarious, and they are very, very proud. So I've never had that. You'll never make it, or no, maybe you should be a doctor or nothing. It was
yeah.
like the
So
world's
you,
yours to go for it.
okay, so because it brings us on to that sort of like the subject of imposter syndrome and inner critics, and often people have that inner voice that says, "Don't step out of line, don't do that," etc.,
Mm.
etc. And often it can be based on a real life character or something that's built up in real life. So, do you have such a thing? Do you ever feel imposter syndrome or have any inner
Yes.
critics?
Of course, because I don't think there's a person in the world who doesn't feel imposter syndrome. And part of mine stemmed from the fact that everybody, when I first started writing, I wrote the first book about sex, and then everybody assumes that you're a sex therapist. Now, I did my academic background is in sex therapy, but I've never acted as a sex therapist. I've never practiced as a sex therapist. I don't sit in an office. I've never been through the formal training. I've just had the academic background. But people always, and they do it on live TV all the time, like this is sex therapist Tracey Cox. And in the beginning, I used to say, no, I'm actually not a sex therapist. I'm just somebody who specializes in sex. You could see them looking at me like, oh, for God's sake, does she have to do that right now? But it was that imposter syndrome. It was like, oh my God, I'm going to get found out. Somebody's going to tell me I'm not, So I always say, look, I'm an expert in sex because of research. And, so will you be if you'd written 17 books about the topic. So
Yeah,
there's that. And then I think there's always that someone's going to turn around and, tell me, I'm not very good at this, or it's all glass and, mirrors or whatever it is, smoke and mirrors. I think everybody feels like that. And as for inner critic, my God, weirdly, I'm less critical of myself in my business success and intelligence. I am super critical, as you well know, about everything else. my appearance, my weight, everything like that. And that's what's really funny, is that everybody thinks I'm super confident, and I am uber confident in lots of ways, but really unconfident in others. I think I'm better
Yeah.
as I'm getting older, though.
Yes. Yeah. And then so tell us about that. Tell us a little bit more about that inner critic and how you deal with it.
I dealt with it by confessing my fears to friends who would just say, "Don't be so ridiculous." You deal with it, I think, by having a really nice, good group of people around you, kind people, supportive people, and being so busy. I think I was so busy, I couldn't indulge it. I couldn't say, "Oh my God, I'm going to have a day lying in bed worrying about it today," because I had no time. So I think
Yeah.
if you're super busy, you kind of have to deal with it. And I think it is the old fashioned way of giving yourself a good talking to, looking at the trappings of success. Like I've got a bookshelf with tons of books in it. So I'd look at that and think, well, obviously I'm doing something right because they're all there. And sort of being a little bit kind at the end of the day to yourself, which is something that I really had to learn though.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. So in what ways, I mean, because part of the thing that I do is teach people the art of being kind to yourself, which it sounds like a
Yeah.
no-brainer, but it's not. So what are the ways that you are kind to yourself?
I'm trying to move finally away from looking critically at every part of my body and just thinking a healthy body is all that I really want at the moment. Because I've had, as everybody has at my age, seen friends get sick and die, and it's pretty awful. So if things like that happen, you do get this awful jolt into reality of like, come on, don't be so ridiculous. And I'm very lucky because I'm very healthy. So yeah, there is that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me.
And one of the things that always surprises people when I tell them is that normally whenever I go to any big job or when I've had a big job, I've always made it a point to ask the CEO or whoever was in charge whether they experience self-doubt. And all of them have said yes. And some of them have said every day. So in terms of self-doubt, where do you range?
I want to ask you a question first. Is that women or men that you were
Men,
talking to?
men, men, both,
Men.
both, yeah,
Wow, that
yeah,
surprises me.
yeah,
That's the other thing I found, is that if you ask people to tell you about their doubts and their fears, they will always tell you. They will always
yeah.
tell you personal things. It's just that no one ever challenges the CEO. But I'm
No,
surprised that the men were equally as forthcoming. That's quite a
yes.
nice thing,
I
actually.
I probably disarmed them. They probably weren't expecting the question. But anyway, they have. They've said that, and the two ones that I'm thinking of are in very, very senior positions. So,
Yeah. But don't you think that that goes with success? Because most successful people are perfectionists. And if you're a perfectionist, then you have to have self-doubt, because otherwise the two go hand in hand, don't they? And I do
yes, I mean,
believe
I
that
think
whole
it
thing. Go on.
I think it definitely is like, for me, perfectionism is sort of like the value of excellence being overplayed. And often
Yes.
people have a
And for
often
every
people
good
have a
quality.
gone.
Sorry, Trace, you go.
Yeah, no, so I was gonna say that, oh, I can't remember what I was gonna say, but, yeah, excellence.
Excellent.
Excellent. It's sort of like a value of excellence gone wrong, and the issue is when you're perfection and a lot of people have a perfectionist inner critic, that it's never good enough, it's never good enough, and I see that as a trait in super successful people. It's sort of what I call my tribe, which is self-critical overachievers that don't see themselves as
Mm.
overachievers because they're so self-critical.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I learned very on in psychology, that a strength is also a weakness, and that you can see it so much. Like I am incredibly organized, and that's what has got me really really far, because you have to be organized to be able to juggle all the stuff that I've done. But it can make me not very spontaneous. I'm not so. It's like, well, shit, you can't now bring that on me because I've got all this organized for that. Like, hence changing rooms for the podcast. Suddenly it was like, oh my God, I've got to rethink everything. How annoying. So I'm probably not the most spontaneous person in the world because I've got that strong organized streak. I'm quite controlling, but then that's helped in help me,
Yeah,
become really, narrow-minded, narrow focus on things. So
yeah.
it is interesting that. So I think that self-doubt would have to go with anyone who is successful. I don't think you'd find well, actually, maybe Philip Green probably would never admit to self-doubt. But I
Yeah, there are
mean,
some people that do, yeah, there are some people you think that have never suffered from imposter syndrome or inner critics in their entire life, yeah,
Mm.
and, it's normally
And
sort of
perhaps they should.
megalomaniacs.
Yes, and
Yeah.
they're narcissists.
Okay, and then so in terms of self-care, you were telling us, what is your kind of version of self-care? So not beating yourself up and being
Not
grateful
beating
for what
myself
you've
up,
got.
but I can. This is going to feed right into your other hat, Trace. But I have to say that one of the best things I ever did was start to do some yoga. And yoga was one because I'm 100 miles an hour person. I never ever, if I exercise, it was like no warming up, no cooling down, make the most of it, hard, like I go at it like 100 miles an hour. And suddenly I got to the point where I was so tense, so stressed, so everything. And I don't know whether it was you that actually recommended it or somebody did. And I just started doing 20 minutes a day. And I'll tell you what, that 20 minutes a day has completely and utterly changed my whole life. It's all about God, you do need to breathe. Learning how to breathe, because I used to hold my breath, taking some time that's just for your body, just for your brain, just to sort of chill and just it's something that was so alien to me because I used to hate all that stuff, that sort of mamby-pamby. It's so words like spiritual and all that. I run from the room. But I do think there is and it's funny how everyone comes around to all these super high achievers come around to it late. It's
Yeah,
like was something that you'd never do early, but they come around to it late. And then once they do, it's like, wow, why did someone not tell me about this earlier? But I
yeah, I
did
think
get told about it earlier, but I wasn't open to listening.
I exactly. I think it's not open, and also I think the thing you learn about things like yoga, et cetera, and self care is it's about building resilience to be able to perform. You know, so
Yes.
to be able to perform at that high level and keep putting out, it's like, okay, when you're like fresh out of the box, you might be a sports car that goes 90, 120 miles an hour, but when you've got a few miles on the clock, you kind of need a bit of like oil and petrol,
Yes.
etc., etc. So I think that's the big thing, and I think there has been a massive switch in mindset, realizing that looking after your physical and mental well-being can help performance in your work. It's a
Mm.
no-brainer.
I
All right, so
think I think I do wonder though on that topic whether I'm just thinking now about whether we've gone too much the other way with mindfulness. I think not so much for older people, but I think the younger generation are almost so adverse to stress and like, oh my God, I mean my you can't possibly, penetrate my you can't say anything to upset me or disturb me or make me stress. I wonder how they're ever going to get anything done.
we'll see.
Concerns
We
me
will.
slightly.
We'll see. So tell me about, one of the things I always like to talk about is sort of inner champions or heroes, like people that you really, really admire, who you look up to, who you would have as your sort of the person that would give you a pep talk. So who are your sort of heroes and inner champions?
My mum is probably number one. That's a very cliched thing to say, but I really do have quite an extraordinary mum. She's 85. She's hilarious. She's so funny, and just no matter what I do, honestly, I swear I could go out and murder half the population of England, and she'd still go, "Well, darling, you must have had a very good reason for that." So she's amazing. I've got a fantastic husband. I've got fantastic friends. So they all are out my little cheer squads. Um, as for people as I've grown up, when I worked at Cosmo, my editor that I spoke about was a woman called Pat Ingram, and she became one of my best friends and my mentor. And she really did shape me. And that whole Cosmo experience was quite extraordinary because I was there 7 years and I stayed much longer than I should have. But because she was such a good businesswoman and such a good mentor, I learned so much from her. And in the end, when I left and went freelance, that loyalty really paid off because Cosmos are all around the world. So when I went freelance, they all bought all my stories, because I'd been so loyal, because they all knew me. So I had this instant client base really with all the Cosmos. And then that was a big leg up to then, get a book commissioned and all that sort of stuff. So that she helped me in more ways than she would ever think. To the fact that I stayed so long led to this decision, led to that decision. So I think, yeah, she was definitely one of them.
Yeah, and what kind of values would you think that she sort of um,
Taught
personifies
me.
or exhibits? Yeah.
Well, that work doesn't start at 9 and at 5. Gosh, we were there for so long that you've got to be loving it or else forget it. I mean, we used to hire people and, because I was there for so long, staff would come and go. And if they were time, clock watchers, or you could see they just didn't really care about it, didn't care about the magazine, they were off. I mean, they were out. She didn't take
Yeah.
long to find an excuse to get rid of them. The other great thing about Cosmo and what she taught me was the reason why Cosmo was so successful was that everybody knew who the Cosmo girl was. You knew what she ate, what she drank, what she looked like, what she, where she went dancing, where she, it was such a set, strong brand that, and that's why all the Cosmos were so successful, because they had such a very, very solid business plan. And that really taught me later on to have to make myself a brand. And I am a registered brand, as you know, and I know my brand so well. I know where I can push it, where I can't. And especially when you're talking about sex and relationships, I got offered lots of slightly dodgy out there, very lucrative things. And I said no, because I know my reader, I know my viewer, I know what people expect of me. And it's a very strong position of I'm the slightly adventurous couple who want to be pushed ever so slightly out of that comfort zone and no further. And
Mhm.
so,
I mean, you raise such a good point, because I think so much about, even if people are employees somewhere,
mm,
having understanding who you are, what you stand for, what you offer. In other words, personal brand is so important. So, what if somebody's listening and thinking, "Oh my God," but it's easy for her. She's got 10 million best-selling books and a product line, etc. It's obvious what her brand is.
mm.
What do you think the ingredients of establishing a brand are? A personal brand.
Well, you've got to know, what are you doing? Who are you aiming at? Like if you're suddenly starting up I don't know, an ironing board brand. I've got my computer on an ironing board. Why do you want to create? There's already ironing boards, out there. What's going to be so special about yours? Who's going to be standing behind the ironing board? What are they? Are they busy? Are they? Who are they? Why? What are they going to get from your product and your brand that's not already out there? You've got to be so specific and have thought it through. And you see it all the time. You see people like coming up with stuff and they come up with really good ideas, but they don't know who they're targeting it at. So I think the really
Mm.
important thing about a brand is to know who the hell you're trying to target at, because otherwise, how are you going to reach them?
Yeah, so who your audience is, or
Yes,
who your target employer is, really, isn't it? Yeah. And
yes,
then what you offer, presumably. Is
yeah.
it? Yeah.
But yeah, what you're offering and who you're aiming it at. That's your brand.
Yeah.
Like, why are you so special? What are your absolute key things? What are your
Yeah.
three key things that are so peculiar to you?
Okay, so what are the three qualities that are peculiar to you?
I knew you could ask me that. Well, I think that sometimes it's not necessarily that the qualities that you have are that amazing, but that they're things that don't often go together. Like, for instance, I'm a really imaginative person and a very creative person, but I'm also quite an organized person. And often you don't get those two things in the same person. So I think that's what made me really successful as an author, because a lot of authors are quite they're sort of creative and need to be inspired, where I'm like the sit down and make yourself write so many words per day type of person. So, and I'm quite good at publicity, I'm quite good at schmoozing people and all those sort of things that authors often aren't, because I've been a business person and I have been in that corporate role. So I think the fact that those sort of qualities aren't generally seen in an author made me a good author. And publishers were thinking, well, okay, well, we know she can carry the publicity, we know she can do all that. So I probably got a lot more ideas through than somebody who couldn't do that could have got through. So I think necessarily three things that maybe are quite unusual together maybe is a good place to start.
Yeah, really good advice. Yeah, three things. So yours are hugely imaginative, but also hugely organized and very good at marketing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also driven would be my third.
Driven.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really
I mean,
driven.
I think most successful people are driven, aren't they? Passionate
Yeah,
and driven. I mean, if
and the
you
other
don't,
thing is sorry, you've got to do what you love. I think that's the thing that's been throughout my whole career. You've got to do what you love. I could never have gone off into a segue. You know what I'm like. I get offered stuff and people, I mean, I got offered a talk show in America that probably would have projected me into superstardom. And I hate doing talk shows. I hated it. It was like the one that I did for Sky. And it would be, a bit like the Trisha Goddard show or Jeremy Kyle. I mean, that is so not me. I didn't care. I was like, people were like, are you crazy? And I was like, no, I'm crazy for taking that because I'd be miserable and I wouldn't do a good job of it because I would have hated it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you bring up a good point there. It's like knowing what you like and sticking to your guns. But I think that takes a lot of I think that takes a lot of maybe self-awareness to know what is really gonna what you're really going to love, because a lot of people would get seduced by oh, it's money, or it's a promotion, or it's and that's what I
Mm.
see a lot of people who get experience and expertise and then get higher positions and more money, but then suddenly find themselves that they're not doing what they love.
Hating the job. That happened to me at Cosmo actually. Was that when I was deputy editor, it was fantastic. I got all the good bits. I got to manage the staff, go on all the junkets, like do all the fun stuff. And then the further up you got, you had more budget meetings. You had to do the grid, which is like laying out the magazine. It was like, oh my God, this isn't what I liked at all. So I didn't
Yeah.
like that. I much preferred being deputy editor.
Yeah,
So
so I think
yeah,
yeah, I think
true.
that's a really important point, is just knowing where you thrive, knowing
Mm,
what the environment is, even if that's not at the top. You don't have to aspire for the top. You can be very, very, very happy not in that top position. And
absolutely.
what are the things that still make you angry?
Gosh.
What are the things that still sort of irritate you, do you think?
What irritates me most is at the moment is middle-aged men getting like almost slagging off women who achieve. It's sort of like, oh my God. Like for instance, the words Greta Thunberg. You mention that in a room of middle-aged men, they go berserk. It's like, what is so threatening to you about that young girl? What is wrong with you that you react like that? And they're vicious about her. And I think that whole, the male pale stale thing, I think men, middle-aged men and older, even older than that, are feeling very threatened by this world. And they should be threatened because it's right that they should be shoved aside because they just lie back. They don't do anything new or good and they don't seem to want change. They're like all the Tory MPs, I'm sorry, they're just there for the benefits. They're not there to make any great changes. So I think the more we push them aside, the better. And I just hate to see that. People that I know and love and who react like that, I just cannot fathom it really. I don't understand why they have to be so vicious. And it's the same with climate change or diversity or any of the topics that we're dealing with now. Women, just all the women I know are like, yeah, bring it on. This is how we should be. The men I know are like, what is all this about? We should be spending money on this. We should be spending money on that. I don't understand why men can be so adverse to it all and women are so much more open to things like this. It's always been that way, I guess.
Yeah, and what would you say, because there are a lot of women or underrepresented groups who are on the receiving end of that. And so what kind of advice would you have for people who encounter, I don't know, sexism, racism, homophobia, etc. Um it's quite hard to be strong and resilient in the face
Mm,
of that, isn't it?
it
Do you
is.
have any advice or any tips?
I think maybe find your tribe and stick with it. I mean, I think you have to. There's no point, for instance, in arguing, going to like an event with tons of homophobic people if you're gay and then trying to argue your case because it's wasted. You just end up feeling awful about yourself and coming home having achieved nothing. So I think know the places where you can make a difference and where you can't, and just stick to those. But I was watching a young girl on Sky News today, and she was talking about trans. She was a black girl. She was talking about trans, and one of the reporters asked her a question that was completely unrelated, really. And it was, I can't remember what the question was, but she just said, "I'm not going to answer that. That's completely out of my area of expertise. What's the next question?" And I thought, wow, good for you. Like, and I think you have to be just deal with it and don't put up with it. And it was, you could sense the road it was going down. It was a road she was not going to go down at all. So she just brought it back to what she wanted to talk about and kept on going. And I think that you probably have to be quite tough and stand up for yourself. And like I said, maybe don't go into those situations that are pointless to be in, but the situations that you can be heard and have a voice, just
Mm.
be tough about what you talk about and what you don't, I guess.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that I coach, for example, what they want to do is be able to, speak their truth in a yogic sense, but like
Mm.
really be able to articulate, be confident about articulating what they think. So you strike me as somebody who's never had to worry about that. So what is the secret, if there is a
About
secret?
articulating what I think. Actually, I think I've got the opposite problem. I think I open my mouth before I think, and that has got me in trouble sometimes. Sometimes I talk a load of old drivel, quite frankly. But yeah, I don't know. Is that something that's just innate? I don't know. I think maybe the articulate bit comes from reading, reading, and reading, and reading, and I was about to say I'm never scared to put forward an opinion, but I certainly used to be, because I was working so hard. I never watched the news. Honestly, I really didn't know what was going on. And then you would see me very quiet, because if you put me in a situation with, I used to go to some of those author parties and feel really stupid, politically stupid, current affairs stupid, because I just hadn't been watching the news for so long. I was just too busy. Just never did.
Yeah,
Sometimes I wish I didn't start up with all the news at the moment. But so, yeah, I think we could all feel, threatened in certain situations.
yeah.
Still,
So really, so understanding, get being. I guess it's about being on a sure footing about what you've got to say.
yes,
Um,
exactly right. I mean, if you started talking to me about something that I knew nothing about, what I do is I try and wing it, and which doesn't really help you out when you're with people who know what they're talking about. And my brother-in-law calls it Tracyisms, because I'll suddenly pluck some statistic out of the air and say 40% of people, blah blah blah, and he goes, "You just completely made that up." And I
yeah.
do. I try and sort of like blag my way out of the situation, and it never ever helps. It never works. So
Well,
yeah,
I
now I've
think
learned to keep quiet.
I mean, one of the things I think is a good thing to do is if you don't understand what's going on, is just to ask questions. Is to
Yes.
ask, like, sort of like, it's not like, oh, what do you mean? But it's just like, oh, can you clarify what do you think about that? Or what,
Mm,
like, because people enjoy talking and enjoy answering questions. So I think by asking questions, you can appear to be knowledgeable, and then you can glean loads of information from what they say. So I think that's the subtle art of winging it, is by asking
yeah.
asking
I think
questions
that's
and
really
sound
good
like,
advice, actually. Yeah, it is.
yeah,
And also people, I mean, a couple of times I've said things like, "What does that word mean?" And people are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you asked that. You're a writer. You're supposed to know." It's like, no, I'm not going to know every single word. And sometimes they're words that other people have known the whole of their life, and I've just never come across. I don't feel any shame in that. I've never had
yeah. I
any
and
shame in admitting that I don't know something.
that's such a big one, isn't it? And I think that is such a part of imposter syndrome, is that people think, I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to look
Mm,
stupid. And, I always just think, you know what? You reframe that and you think, well, I know 80% of it, but there's 20% I don't know. And, that's
mm,
my growth area or my learning. The smart thing is to ask. But it does come down, a lot of people do really, really worry about what other people think of them. So
mm.
what's your take on that? Do you worry about what other people think of you?
Of course I do. But I remember when I was doing psychology, there's what's it called? The spotlight syndrome, it's called, I think, where if you're in any given situation, especially a social situation, you're worrying about yourself. You're thinking, "Oh my God, they think I'm stupid. They're looking at me. I haven't got the right top on. I haven't got the right this on. They're all thinking this." And every single person in the room has got the same bubble above their head. No one's listening to anybody else. They're just worried about themselves. So I think if you think like that, and while you're sitting there worrying about what's going on, you're not even listening to the person who's thinking to themselves, "That came out wrong. Oh my God, I should have said that differently." No one's even heard it. They're just in their own little worlds worrying about themselves. So I think that can get you through a lot of situations,
I think that's
really.
so true. You know that thing when you sit around a table and they say, "Oh, we're going to do introductions," and there's that thing called the creeping death, where you wait for your turn, and
Oh, I
before
hate
that
that.
comes, your heart is beating, and all you're thinking about is, "What am I going to say? What am I going to say?"
Yeah.
So you don't listen to anything else. It's so true that people. I think that is one of the secrets in life, is that don't worry about what other people are thinking of you, because they're more worried about what you're thinking of them.
Yeah. And I think you actually, because I'm terrified of public speaking. I don't like it. I'm okay at it now. I'm better than I was. But you said to me, I think, because you were really good and gave me a big pep talk, and you said, look, the people that you're talking to don't know what you were about to say. They don't know what your speech is. They don't know the bits you've left out or what you haven't said or that you've said differently. But I used to get off and go, well, I should have said that. I didn't say this. I put it much better here. And you're just talking. That's what you said. You said you're just talking to people and entertaining them. People just want to be entertained. And that dropped the whole, like, I must impart so much wisdom, I must do this. But half the time, people just want a good laugh and to talk to somebody who's real and actually looks like they want to be there. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was
it's
good
so
advice.
true.
Yeah.
It's so true. I think it's just like that. The key to that is one, public speaking gets easier the more you do it. So just
Yes,
take
of
the
course.
opportunity.
Yeah.
But two, it's just like speak like you're talking to a bunch of friends, like you're on the same
Mm,
level with. And the other thing is just speak from the heart. Speak about what you know. Don't pretend to be anybody that you're not. I mean, but
mm,
honestly, I think it's just just practicing, just doing it, making it, doing it is the key. Like,
mm.
but yeah, brilliant. And
It's
so you
funny
don't
though
really,
that, oh,
no, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that when I was doing stuff in the States, I used to go on the Today Show, which would be 20, 30 million people watching. And I never got nervous with that, or a little bit, but I really could cope with that because it was only two people that I was looking at. But I still don't like, I know the thought of that's not so good, but knowing that you're going to be on and looking at that many people, that many people watching you wasn't as scary as sitting in a room with 20 people looking at me. So I'm quite happy with this lockdown Zoom interview business because I can't see the people that I'm talking to. I just
Yeah.
can't bear looking at the faces because most of the time they're just really looking you over, aren't they? I remember doing one talk and I wore hot pink shoes. And it was a really important talk for family planning about sex education. Everybody just spent the whole time just looking at my shoes.
Yeah, but they probably quite enjoyed it, didn't they? I mean, I think that is a trick, that when you're public speaking, wear something interesting, you know?
Yeah, maybe.
I think yeah, it is a performance and not everybody likes performing, but I do believe that even introverts and people who don't like it can learn to love it, you know?
Mm. Yeah,
It is
it is
about
practice though.
like,
It's
it
so
is
practice.
practice. It is
And
practice.
it's
And so
easier with strangers than it is friends. I still find it really hard with friends, more so than I do strangers. Strangers are
really,
fine, but
why
friends,
do you think
yeah.
that? Why is that then? Why do you think that
I
is?
don't know. I don't know. Well, I've talked to loads of people and they said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." So maybe it's just you, Trace, because I think you know them and they know you, and rather than thinking, but they're going to forgive me all the sins. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's just much harder. If I don't know the people, it doesn't really matter what they think of
Well,
me.
you know what? I think there's emotion when you really know people very well. Like, it's like I remember like one of my friend's 40th birthdays. I mean, albeit, I was a bit tired and emotional from the night before, but I remember trying to give a speech about her on her 40th birthday, and I just basically sobbed all the way through it. And the rest of her friends were like looking at me, going, "What the heck is wrong with this woman?" Anyway, but I think
That's hilarious.
there's quite a lot of emotion, isn't there, when it comes to talking about
Yeah.
your friends? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
true. And
like,
it usually is an emotional speech. You're right.
so getting back to sort of like career confidence and leadership skills, and what would you say have been the most useful qualities or values or things that have helped you sort of be fearless about your career and confident?
I think I'm such a planner. So I've always had the 2-year plan, the 5-year plan. I've always planned out my career. Like, for instance, when I left Cosmo to go freelance, it was seamless. I literally had a week by week plan of how to do it so that I had no gap in income. And I ended up with no gap in income because I do that. This is what I'm going to do this week. This is what I'm going to do next week. I had all my freelance, I sorted out bread and butter accounts that would sail me through. So I think if you're going to succeed and you want to have and be ambitious and you have a plan, sit down and write down what I want to achieve this year. What's it going to take me to achieve this year? People either love doing that or they hate doing that. But even if you hate doing that, make yourself do that because it really does keep you on target and moving forward. Otherwise, you end up just talking a lot about what you're going to do and nothing ever happens with it.
Yeah. So that's the sort of build a vision and then a route map to delivering that, a
Yes.
practical route map to delivering that vision. Yeah.
Practical, practical,
Practical.
practical. I'm so practical with everything. That
Yeah.
to me is the secret. It's just to be practical. And also that whole prior planning and preparation is just never, as much as you want to like wing it to a point, otherwise you look too practiced. I think I always want to know what I'm going into, what I'm going to be up against, what are going to be the pitfalls. I like to know the nitty gritty before I go into anything. I think
Yeah,
it's
so
important to know that.
yeah, so preparation for success. There is that saying, I can't remember what it is now,
Mm.
but it's one of those things that is about preparing for success. And what about how do you measure success for you personally?
I think it's all about how happy you are doing what you do. I mean, honestly, when I wrote that first book, I just thought, I cannot believe that somebody paid me some money. It was a very small amount of money to just sit there and write. I just couldn't believe it. I just thought I was the luckiest person alive. And I remember thinking, do you know what? Even if this doesn't make a lot of money, I don't really care. I think I'd rather not have money and do this than I would have lots of money and succeed. And like being offered that TV job, it was a no-brainer for me to say no to that. I did have little moments of doubt, but I completely forgot about it. The
Yeah,
minute I said no, it was gone. So
yeah.
stick to what you love. Like just do what you love and you can't go wrong.
Yeah, brilliant, excellent. And what would be, say, for people following in your footsteps or other people who just want some of that confidence and that success, etc. How would you? What would sort of like your three golden rules be? One of them might be planning, presumably, or preparation. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it would be. I tell you something else I've left out, which would definitely be one of my three rules. And what kept me successful was that I had a lot of eggs in different baskets. So I was in magazines when magazines were really successful. Then I moved into books when books were really successful. Then I went into TV when TV was really successful. And then when all that was drying up, and columns, when columns, you used to be paid a fortune for a column. Now, if I was just stuck with that and hadn't gone on to the product ranges and hooked up with the sex toy people, I wouldn't have an income. I'd have a very small income. Okay, so I think it's like having lots of fingers in different pies is very, very important, particularly in this day and age. I mean, look at what's happened with lockdown. So I think the more different skill sets you have and the more different career plans you have and projects and jobs, the better you'll end up, because I think then you can figure out, okay, I really like that. Actually, I'm not going to need this anymore. I'm going to go more into that. I think that was something that I think people should try and do. I know that's difficult because it's fine for somebody like me in a job like mine, but that's not so easy to do in some other jobs.
Yeah,
But I think if you can diversify and have lots of different branches of what you do, I think that's the thing to do.
yeah.
Um,
I
Another
think
thing
that's right. I
is,
mean, with that, I think it's like the side hustle, isn't it? It's always having a side
yeah,
hustle. And I think, like certainly for me, when I went into my TV career, I would never have considered a side hustle and would never have thought that I could do anything else. And now that I have a portfolio career, they're all kind of like, they all sort of side hustles. Or I think I kind of like think that you've got your purpose and the thing that you love to do. And then they're right
mm,
at the center, which is a hub of a wheel. And then you've got all the different spokes of
yeah.
different manifestations. And that's what you're talking about, I think.
That's exactly right. We both have very similar careers because all our stuff also feeds into each other. Like, so magazine feeds into books, feeds into, and you're the same with your yoga in the boardroom, feeds into this sort of thing, feeds into. So it's all got to work together. But I do think that is very important. I think also that whole fake it till you make it thing. You can bluster your way through a lot of things, though. A friend who will remain anonymous has just got a job faking a little bit too much and now is in this position of actually overstating what she can do and what she can't do, and is now having to walk in on Monday and probably can't deliver. I would never do that. So don't fake it too much. And what else? Do what you love. I'd have to go back to that one.
Yeah,
Do
so
what you
hang on.
love.
So we got well, we've got four, I think. It's like
Oh,
basically do what you love. It's that preparation, preparation, preparation for success. It's
yeah,
diversification. So
yep,
multiple, where you can have a side hustle or multiple different or evolve. I think what you've done is kind of evolve as
yeah,
markets have foot. So don't stick to one thing. And the other one is what? Fake it till you
till you
make
make
it.
it.
Like
Yeah,
hustle. Okay. And
yeah.
what would your what if you were going to encapsulate all that, what would your motto or what would your motto to live by be?
Gosh, be brave, and which is exactly what I should be telling my stepdaughter. Be brave and go for it. If you really, really, really want to do something, just go for it. And it doesn't matter whether, only one person in a million has made it in that. If you could be that one person in a million.
Yeah. Lovely.
Courage.
Courage, have courage. Yes. That
Mm.
is absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your wisdom, your tips on what it takes to be career confident and a fearless leader. We've learned so much and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks, Trace.
Thank you.